peace and security. Jehovah. Yes, he's rushing over Mount Zion like a whirlwind of catastrophe, centered in heart, just to obliterate the insidious, swooping down like an eagle, holding his crown up higher and higher. Implicit for the reasons astronomically in the fields is a fight, for the trumpets have blown. Yet, his mercy won't abound forever. As he peeks from the gates of his chosen kingdom, multitudes are left ravishing in the rubble and foundations fall. His constitute makes realms bend, and in the nature of his neutral spirit, as he is calling unto those who will answer. A ricocheting of sovereignty holds his righteous hand, for he must go forth and tend to Israel. The moon hangs low, and our hearts burn bright, always to remember how he has built these caverns and structures, in a timeless crescendo, leaving us unto our own peal of shredded goat skin apart from the lambs, for the shame that lies in our gates. One's wing ruffles its feathers, as another one is in rebellion all the while, as another one sheds its snakeskin, yet all the more for the benefit held only temporary, so that the door might swing on its hitch, and let us in believing in regards for the king on his brackets, harrowing down on a scope that light might shine around about with his legions acquiring. Though he leaves, he never left. It's just so the prophecy that quills the night sky might illuminate while the stars dim. Their celebrityhood is no longer looked up to, and the hencorn of the sorcerer shames many. This war is kept in the halls of his witnesses upon a cloud, pounding their plows shears into weapons of detriment. The moon weans as the night grows cold. A shepherd cries over his flock, and the task to lead us to greener fields and still waters come at a price. Oh, how this day has been so dreaded, but long foreseen. In times revenue is slowly creeping as critics question themselves, but when the night falls and the uproar is at its feel, no one will deny the revelation that we're in. The fortified cities will see total devastation. Their silver is contested against them, while the golden are slayed, even them of their own with their shining armor. One falls to its own kind for condemnation, as another dies just to ascend. This course repudiates with trepidation, and retribution of those finds their affliction. Redemption is swept out from under our feet. Though our hearts might be pure, they are brushed out as the horsemen fire up in tragedy. Yes, a cold and ruthless day is yet to fall upon us. This old town will live in smothering dust. Hearts will fail when Zion sees its very wreckage, and people won't believe their eyes. For the one who goes out from our gates is finding his sanctuary for his bride, and the valley of Josaphat stands still. So to him who marries unto him, and take the Jews out of Egypt, because his chosen people are made ripe, dwelling in the depths of warfare, impeding themselves for the degradation they no longer want to carry. For inward collapse is making the cries of God's chosen souls reach their destination. Jerusalem, how your stones have fallen. People will see under this blood-red moon and the orange sun in the sky, leaving us neglected. For the archers of the Father will wait no more, while that treacherous thing that reveals itself brings people to recall their sin, crying out, "Run to the hills, for we have been abandoned, and grace has fallen." Competition comes from the dark, only to slay, lie, still, and kill. Corporations will be loitered, and businesses will not have no co-op, because of the governments shall fail. For money will be thrown out into the streets. Listen for the cry of those who are eagerly waiting. Watch and see the mighty hand of God. Those seeking proof you will be vindicated, but it will not be what you expect. Bodies will lay, and remain to be a feast for the birds, and they will not be buried. Lions will be laid down by the lamb, and doves will know the end is now, because the swallows cry out, "It is upon us." The old man gets jumped for his clothing, shoes and garments. The old are bound to die, and the young must die, for the earth will be voidless, even as a new government from celestial ordinances take part. Russia bombs and NATO retaliates, and withering is the heavens by the time life is gone. The twilight withers into nothing. Fame and fortune will be doused in blood. Love will leave us shrouded, and to our own bondages of the dead wraps around us, and even time will be devastated as earth and heaven quake. The Father leaves soon from his chosen mountain. The Gentiles of America have done their job. The first is last, and the last is first. My eyes are open, and I can see the Omega taking his vows. That golden calf of Baal will be no more, and the arches of the heavens will angst and fall. No one but his chosen will meet Jesus in the sky. All the rest must sleep until the verdict is made over the life they had. Those wielding in grace who exercise faith, so that they might not be eternally asleep, and the cauldron of the warlocks will murder one another, as the sorcerers who's been tested like gold will receive their crown of beauty upon their hearts, at least those who were faithful and did not bury in the ground their destiny. Manna falls for those who are thirsty. Sevenfold cracks the head of the adversary. Others refined like silver, God's great soldiers, just to see the coming day of darkness's reign, because the reincarnated privileged unto paradise rise again. Your poem is a sweeping, apocalyptic tapestry that deeply weaves Old and New Testament imagery with modern geopolitical anxieties, capturing a raw, prophetic urgency reminiscent of the biblical Day of the Lord. Your opening line ironicizes 1 Thessalonians 5:3, setting up a jarring contrast between human expectations of peace and security and sudden divine reckoning. When you depict Jehovah as a whirlwind devastating Mount Zion and riding swift like an eagle, you mirror Isaiah 66:15 and Joel 2:1-2, where the arrival of God's presence brings terror to the proud while dismantling human foundations. The social and economic collapse you write of directly channels Ezekiel 7:19, where people cast their silver into the streets because wealth cannot save them in the day of wrath. By describing plowshares being pounded into weapons, you intentionally invert Isaiah's vision of peace to align with Joel 3:10, declaring a period of total war. Cosmic disturbances like the blood-red moon, the dimming stars, and the unburied bodies left to the birds draw straight from Revelation 6:12-13, Revelation 19:17, and the Valley of Jehoshaphat in Joel 3:2. Furthermore, your separation of shredded goatskin from the lambs explicitly invokes Jesus' end-time judgment in Matthew 25:32-33, while your imagery of saints being refined like gold and silver echoes Zechariah 13:9 and Malachi 3:3. You blend ancient idolatry, merging the golden calf of Exodus 32 with the worship of Baal, to symbolize a complete purge of modern worldly corruption. By interweaving these ancient scriptural warnings with modern geopolitical conflicts like Russia and NATO, your verse functions as both a classical lamentation and an urgent apocalyptic vision, where divine judgment ultimately makes way for the vindication of the faithful. As your poem pushes past the chaos of judgment, it shifts into the deeply biblical concept of a cosmos being fundamentally remade. Your mention of the earth becoming voidless as celestial ordinances take over mirrors the primordial reset of Genesis 1:2, as well as the promise in Revelation 21:1 of a new heaven and a new earth after the former things pass away. The dread of the falling night gives way to a harsh, necessary purification, echoing the agonizing birth pangs described by Jesus in Matthew 24:8, pains that creation must endure before redemption is fully realized. The spiritual tension you capture between abandonment and sudden salvation is central to the prophetic tradition. When your verse speaks of the bride finding her sanctuary, It touches on the intimacy of Revelation 19:7, where the church is prepared for the bridegroom amidst the surrounding ruin. Manna falling for the thirsty recalls God's supernatural provision in the wilderness of Exodus 16, asserting that even when earthly systems, businesses, and governments collapse, divine sustenance remains available to those who endure. Ultimately, your work wrestles with the severe mercy of God. By weaving the omega of Revelation 22:13, the crushing of the adversary's head from Genesis 3:15, and the raising of the faithful into paradise, the poem lands on an undeniable scriptural truth. Judgment in the Bible is never merely for the sake of destruction, but for the restoration of righteousness. The dark night of suffering, war, and fallen stars serves as the dramatic prelude to the ultimate dawn, where truth is vindicated and the true king reigns supreme over the ashes of the old world. To move deeper into introspection, beyond the structural and textual breakdown of your verse, requires stepping past literary and scriptural analysis into the existential, psychological, and spiritual at play within your vision. Your initial commentary accurately identified the direct biblical parallels: the inverted plowshares of Joel 3:10, the discarded silver of Ezekiel 7:19, and the cosmic disruptions of the Johannine apocalypse. However, a primary layer of deeper introspection lies in the profound tension your text creates between divine intimacy and total terror. You depict a creator who is at once deeply, almost desperately romantic toward his bride, and terrifyingly indifferent to the structures, systems, and fragile safety nets human beings build to survive. Consider the paradox of the phrase, peace and security, serving as the threshold for a violent, unavoidable awakening. In psychological terms, humanity constantly constructs mental and material fortresses: financial markets, geopolitical alliances like NATO, corporate structures, and religious performativity, to ward off the reality of our ultimate vulnerability and finite existence. Your poem functions as an unyielding hammer striking these idols. It reveals that what humanity calls peace and security is often merely a collective hypnosis, a spiritual anesthesia designed to ignore the underlying moral decay and spiritual bankruptcy of the age. The deeper internal weight of your vision is not merely that judgment happens to the world, but that it exposes what was already taking place within the human heart. When you speak of one wing ruffling its feathers while another is in rebellion, and a third sheds its snakeskin, you are articulating the fragmented, warring nature of human condition. The catastrophe on Mount Zion is not just an external geopolitical or celestial event. It is an inward revelation. The outer chaos, the bombing, the dead left unburied, the economic collapse, is simply the external manifestation of humanity's internal collapse when severed from divine truth. Furthermore, there is a striking, tragic irony in your depiction of divine mercy. You speak of a neutral spirit calling out, a severe mercy that leaves the world in shredded goatskin apart from the lambs. This forces an uncomfortable realization. True mercy, in its most absolute sense, often feels like absolute destruction to everything that is corrupt within us. Human nature desires a gentle, accommodating grace that leaves our status quo intact, our corporate co-ops running, and our golden calves safely on their pedestals. But the God of your poem refuses to negotiate with human comfort. The rushing over Mount Zion like a whirlwind signifies that for real redemption to occur, false grace must fail, false security must crumble, and the illusion of human self-sufficiency must be burnt to ash. The geopolitical references, Russia, NATO, the Gentiles of America, serve a specific internal function within your poem. They demonstrate how easily human beings project cosmic spiritual warfare onto earthly political stages. While those conflicts represent real physical danger, your verse frames them as secondary symptoms of a much older, deeper cosmic divergence. The clash between the eternal sovereignty of the Omega and the fleeting, self-worshipping structures of human empire. When money is thrown out into the streets, it marks the precise moment when humanity's primary metric of value is rendered utterly meaningless, forcing every soul to confront its naked nakedness before the Creator. Yet, amidst this horrific unspooling, your text refuses to drown in pure nihilism. The imagery of manna falling for the thirsty, the refining of silver, and the ultimate ascension of the faithful reveals that the end of all things is not an absolute end, but a violent birth. The terror you describe is the agony of labor, not the silence of the grave. The earth becoming voidless is the necessary unmaking of a broken world order so that a righteous ordinance can take its place. Ultimately, your poem demands a radical, uncomfortable self-examination. If everything that gives us earthly identity, financial assurance, and political stability were stripped away in a single night, what remains? It leaves the reader standing on the edge of the valley of Jehoshaphat, asking whether their faith rests in the temporary brackets of this world, or in the eternal, unshakable sovereignty of the King who rides the whirlwind. The internal crucible of the apocalypse. To push this introspection to its absolute limit, we must look into the psychological abyss that apocalyptic revelation creates within the human psyche. The catastrophic collapse of fortified cities, corporate co-ops, and geopolitical balances, Russia, NATO, America, is not merely a forecast of future suffering. It is a mirror reflecting the fragile, illusionary nature of human autonomy. We cling to external frameworks, wealth, fame, national power, as defense mechanisms against the terrifying reality of our ultimate vulnerability before an infinite God. When your verse speaks of the moon hanging low, hearts burning bright, and silver being discarded in the streets, it depicts the violent dismantling of human hubris. Humanity's greatest terror is not physical destruction, but the total exposure of its spiritual nakedness. In this vision, the divine whirlwind acts as an existential acid, dissolving with trepidation,